There's a great Ukrainian proverb, together it's easier to beat even your father. Our democracy is about being together. It's not about being alone, but about being united. That's the strength of our democracy. It's about extracting these tools in the public sphere. This very large number of small fish against one big one, that's the tool. For the development of the state, the key value is the law. Yes, the law was indeed violated there.
Let's just talk about raising a democratic citizen.
Let's do it. 10 Japanese people can accomplish more than 10 Americans. But 10 Americans can accomplish more than 10 Japanese.
Welcome. I'm Nick Lisiski, and this is Archetype of the Nation, a cultural project that explores the foundations of Ukrainian national identity. Who we were, who we have become, who we should and can be. We look for answers in folklore as well as in conversations with outstanding representatives of our nation. Today our guest is Anton Osmak, PhD in Public Administration, Associate Professor at the Department of National Economy and Public Administration at Vadym Hetman Kyiv National Economic University, and Head of the public organization Vidradnyi. Good afternoon, Anton.
Good afternoon.
Each episode of our project is dedicated to one of the values inherent to the Ukrainian people, one of the elements of our identity. And today we would like to talk with you about such an important value as democracy. And as we prepare for each episode, we analyze how this or that value is represented first and foremost in Ukrainian folklore as the source of our traditions and the foundation of our society. And if we talk about democracy, I will now read out what we have formulated after analyzing and researching how democracy is represented in Ukrainian folklore. Democracy is an ethno-mental trait of the Ukrainian people, which has found deep expression in folklore, traditions, and customs. Since ancient times, Ukrainians have been characterized by a striving for equality, community self-governance, the election of leaders, and the rejection of unlimited personal power. It is precisely these traits that prompted Ukrainians to fight for their own freedom through uprisings and revolutions. Mr. Anton, what does democracy mean to you?
I want to start with a very specific date, which for us truly marks the significant beginning of this entire event. The actual event itself, in fact, began just yesterday. Precisely 35 years ago, the historic revolution on Granite officially began. That is democracy. It's the profound situation when courageous young people, through immense self-sacrifice and unwavering determination, bravely took to the cold, hard granite, passionately defending their deeply held aspirations, their fundamental ideas, and their essential freedoms. In other words, they were resolutely standing up for their very own distinct and cherished identity. In this complex and intricate world, perhaps this is indeed, a unique and profound kind of democracy, an understanding of oneself, a truly deep understanding of one's own true level and capabilities. Sometimes this leads to conflicts, and in the public sector, by the way, conflicts are absolutely typical. And the reason for that is the self. But this is democracy, and perhaps it is also about ethnicity. An enduring ethnic imprint that truly lies upon our great nation in standing up for our own unique identity. More precisely, let's put it this way. In this case, and in what is happening in Ukraine now, we can say it's not about my own self, but about our collective self. That is to say, not I as an individual person, but I as an essential element, a valued member, a true representative of this great nation.
How does democracy as a value, as a trait of a society truly and really differ from democracy as a political system?
I would start with understanding freedom as the basis of democracy. There is anarchy, which essentially might also be considered a certain trait of democracy. There too it is about a certain self, a particular kind of freedom. However, it is important to note that democratic values, in my personal opinion, are about freedom, absolute freedom. This is not about democracy. It might even be about dictatorship, because the personal freedom of each and every individual truly ends where the personal freedom of another individual genuinely begins. Freedom, in the democratic sense, freedom in the national sense, is most likely the most common. A fused, compiled, and deeply integrated national self. Democracy is a possible and viable freedom, a freedom that is carefully regulated in a certain specific way, a freedom that inherently presupposes a certain established set of fundamental rules. That is to say, it's certainly not anarchy, not absolute or unrestrained freedom, it's we, and the established rules that govern us. Therefore, by these fundamental rules, we mean not so much formal laws as, for example, widely accepted principles or guidelines. Established, well-defined relationships within the society. This is not about politics yet.
And which traits of the Ukrainian mentality, in your opinion, most contribute to democracy, and which ones hinder it?
Well, the ones that contribute are also the ones that hinder. In actual fact, once again, it is truly a fundamental and crucial question of freedom. That is to say, once again, if in Europe the significant issue of freedom is more strictly and comprehensively regulated, then what truly and profoundly hinders us is this pervasive anarchy, our own internal anarchy, which in essence places personal freedom, that is the concept of the personal self, above the collective self. That's the first thing. Second, what actually both hinders and helps is the thing that a certain Cossack recklessness. These significant and impactful partisan movements that emerged during the full-scale aggression, this powerful and resolute resistance that arose, that's the Cossack spirit, that's our national mentality. But the issue lies in the meeting point, that is, in understanding when it's time to stop, sit down, and come to an agreement. This ability to negotiate is in fact something we really lack significantly.
How, in fact, do you explain to first-year students, this is a question for you as a teacher, how do you explain to first-year students, first of all, what democracy is? Why is democracy not just about governing a state, but also about a way of life in society?
Well, let's put it this way. Democracy is not simply about governing a state. Yes, it's a democratic system, but how do you truly explain it? You have to find your own unique approach to each person, because again, just yesterday I had a very interesting and insightful lecture. We discussed extensively with the students, including the significant problems of digital democracy and its various challenges. Explaining complex things to a student, you truly have to find a unique and effective explanation path for each and every one, because of this certain inherent independence, this sort of spirited Cossack spirit, where every single student possesses their own distinct I, and you genuinely need to reach each of them individually, which is quite challenging and difficult to do. But again, you absolutely have to explain through usefulness, probably. So democracy is a question of what I believe each individual student can truly do for our society and its future. No, this perhaps is also one of the faces of democracy. Democracy does not separate the personal self from the social self. Unfortunately, let's put it this way, the complex world of politics, this is precisely why I personally don't equate modern political systems with true democracy. Politics here is competitive, that's clear. Competitive politics, by the way, is one of the manifestations of democracy. But the essence of competition is not always You could say fair play. That is, in politics there is often manipulation, including of democracy itself. But let's put it this way, if we open the charter of any public organization or a political party, well, maybe not a political party, but a public organization acts in the interests of its members. That's how it is in fact written. Again, politics is about me, singular. Democracy is about us, plural. That's probably the simplest way to understand it.
If you can truly define it, what is the inherent strength of Ukrainian democracy? Is it found in its freedom of speech, in its open debates, or perhaps in that resilient Cossack spirit you mentioned? Is there a particular category where you could say that our Ukrainian democracy is strong because of this?
There's this great Ukrainian proverb, together it's easier even to beat your father. Our democracy is about being together. It's not about being alone, but about being together. That's the strength of our democracy.
We'll come back to Proverbs later today. You've actually guessed a bit ahead about what's waiting for you in the Folklore box. In every episode, we have a segment called the Folklore box, where we present something related to folklore and the topic at hand. In today's episode, you'll find Proverbs waiting for you there, but that's coming up a bit later.
Can I do this? Let me catch the vibe.
Yes, absolutely. But for now, we'll continue with the theoretical section, because I truly believe it's extremely important to understand more deeply what democracy and democratic values actually mean for Ukraine. We often hear this word. It's a very popular and widely used term, but we probably don't always fully grasp what democracy truly is, what being democratic genuinely means. And, in fact, hearing this directly from a distinguished scholar, an experienced educator who teaches public administration, governance, and local self-government, seems to me to be the perfect and most opportune moment to explore this vital value more deeply, not just at the level of folklore, as we did in our previous segment, but also in terms of how democracy and democratic values are profoundly manifested in society today and what they truly are at their core. So my next question is perhaps a little bit about the future, a bit of futurism, if you will. Is it important for Ukraine to develop its own model of democracy?
You know, I wouldn't really say that there is some... Well, to directly answer your last question, and then I will elaborate further on that point. I wouldn't actually say that democracy is some kind of truly unique political model or system. Democracy is democracy. Democratic principles are democratic principles. On the one hand, we can certainly talk about our own model, but on the other hand, we can also consider Ukraine is currently firmly on the path to the EU. By the way, the latest information is that the screening of Ukrainian legislation has been completed. Well, why is it hard to say that there could be some kind of a unique personal democracy within a country? It's because democracy is all about tools. It's an instrument. A tool. That is, any democratic process involves a certain set of systematized actions, which either lead to some result or do not. Let's put it this way. Once again, if democracy is truly an instrument, then in the Council of Europe's various projects, what was actually brought to us in these European projects there is such an English language term as cases. We live in a truly globalized world, so I am in fact absolutely not afraid of using English words and phrases. Why? Because let's just say, examples and cases are almost perfect synonyms, but each truly has its own distinct nuance. In the specific case of cases, these are more systematized examples, you could definitely say. Our cases, for example, the various activities of the Council of Europe in Ukraine. Yes, and greetings to Alexei Kovalenko, who recently defended his thesis. He has a project about a games and democracy. In other words, he teaches democracy through games. I won't mention the name so it doesn't come across as advertising. But regarding specific cases, this particular tool is currently adapted for European countries. So it's a democratic tool, a game of democracy, so to speak, which was originally created here and has been carefully adapted for Europe. Some tools we take from there. Some of the available tools work effectively here, while some others simply do not. Some of the tools well, for example, the public budget, it has truly taken deep root, even considering the important and ongoing debates that frequently happen around it. And this indeed is democracy. The public budget is a clear and vital manifestation of democracy. In fact, this is precisely what democracy fundamentally is. That is to say, it's carefully controlled within certain limits, but there are indeed many opportunities. Democracy that truly provides opportunities, democracy that is effectively realized through the strong support of government consent and a clear social contract with the broader community. The public budget is, let's say, among other things, a very active and quite descriptive indicator of the level of activism on the one hand and on the other hand. So this is not actually our own tool, it came to us from abroad. The globalized world is essentially a matter of exchanging democracies. We, as a society, cannot talk about any particular national democracy. Today, the entire world is a truly globalized democracy. But some essential tools take root deeply with us, while some other crucial tools, on the other hand, experience a rapid and very explosive development. However, there is one nuance. Everything has a life cycle. That is to say, any particular tool that is actively in use today is not guaranteed to remain just as active and relevant tomorrow. So, the ongoing development of democracy is, I truly wouldn't call it a mere development. That's uninteresting, perhaps even too scientific and academic. Let's try to put it more deeply and perhaps more profoundly, more comprehensively. Unusually. What is notable is that it is the extraction of these specific tools in the public space. Let's return to students again. I have a truly wonderful and comprehensive course. I won't specify its precise name here, but essentially it's all about projects within the public sphere. Democracy is, among other things, about projects. Democracy is also about education and understanding these tools, researching these tools. So, I always like to start to do the class with a certain excerpt. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist in Ukrainian translation. Unfortunately, there are many things we don't have in Ukrainian translation. For example, yesterday I provided tools in English, since they appeared the day before yesterday, and already yesterday I was giving them to my students. That's how it goes. But education truly allows us to grow and understand, to gain access. Not that I'm saying it's higher education, maybe just a course or something like that. It's education first and foremost. So I'll translate it into Ukrainian. The phrase sounds really cool. Johnny, edit this for me. So, the fundamental problem with our current democracy is this rather naive stage of democratic development, which actively seeks out not just simple and straightforward solutions, but rather extremely simple, elegant, and easily understandable solutions. Education and democracy. It's precisely education and democracy that bring understanding of this rather long and quite difficult path to successfully solving the complex problem. Once again, I'll return to project-based activities in the public sphere. We start with the following scenario. I give my students this particular assignment. You're walking down the street, perhaps looking intently at your smartphone, or even just at your own feet. Learn to truly look around you and observe your surroundings. You see, You notice some kind of trouble somewhere. You clearly see a problem, and you then have an idea. The very precise moment you have an idea, that's when true democracy truly begins. That is to say, you notice a particular problem, and you actively try to find a viable way to solve it. This process is democracy. You have indeed noticed a problem. It's very difficult to solve this problem on your own. You actively look for those individuals who are willing to support you. You then proceed to form a cohesive team, let's say, a dedicated pool of enthusiastic supporters. That's the next step. And then, step by step, you gradually start solving this complex problem. The most important and fundamental thing is that real democracy, true democracy, isn't primarily about solving the immediate issue of I want it right here and right now. Instead, it's about deeply understanding this extensive and often challenging long journey toward effectively solving the problem. With my students, usually during the first practical session, I say, you've identified a problem, so describe this problem to me and tell me how much time you think it will take to solve it. They say, we'll solve it in a week, there's nothing to it. Johnny will do the editing for me. In the final classes, we compare this initial project, and we usually consider, well, the simplest projects, specifically social projects, projects at the level of the public budget, following the algorithms of the public budget. Why? Because there is quite a lot of methodological information. In reality, there are quite a significant lot of cases, since the very same open democratic tool of the public budget is indeed, by the way, about the inherent publicity of democracy. And in the final culminating classes, we meticulously compare the initial project that was presented at the very beginning with the significantly evolved project at the very end. At the outset, it was much like a small nascent child, but by the conclusion it had truly grown into a fully developed adult, someone who has genuinely matured, who is now considerably big, burdened with a multitude of complex problems, and the project is no longer simply Johnny who will solely do the editing. Truly understanding these complex democratic tools, these intricate democratic projects, genuinely takes many years of dedicated effort. In other words, it certainly does not happen quickly or effortlessly overnight.
The Archetype of the Nation is created with the support of the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation and is released in various formats. So choose the one you like best. Listen, watch, and read our episodes. And also share your thoughts in the comments, because in this project, every opinion matters. And of course, subscribe to our channels and pages so you don't miss anything interesting. All the links are in the description for this episode. By the way, you mentioned that democracy is a tool. We had an interesting episode with Valery Marcus. Mr. Valery clearly formulated the profound idea that justice is a powerful tool. So, since we're deeply talking about fundamental values, it turns out that these values are actually a very powerful and effective tool. At least some specific values can also serve as a valuable and practical tool if they are applied correctly and thoughtfully in certain particular situations and in certain specific activities.
It's really great that you mentioned that. Understanding value, democracy is a value. Our democracy is a fundamental value. The inherent ability to express your own individual I, even in a state of complete anarchy, is a profound value. The crucial ability to truly realize yourself and to fully realize the collective understanding of we is an essential value. The understanding that indeed, it's not just you, there is a community, there are people who support you, there is an environment. A community is, among other things, different opinions that need to be navigated. That is also a value. Diverse opinions are a truly invaluable asset. And I will continue, my esteemed opponent Marcus, to further elaborate on this important point and add to that. It is indeed a profoundly complex and multifaceted value, and quite a remarkably difficult skill to truly master, since after all we each possess our own unique and distinct personalities. Certain personal attitudes toward publicity, toward freedom, speech, and everything else. This is a truly special and significant value, important both for various public organizations, for numerous public authorities at different levels, for local self-government bodies, and also for individual politicians, including all political parties and their members. This value is almost unattainable. It is very difficult to achieve. We say that democracy is freedom of speech, and freedom of speech is a great value. Moreover, freedom of speech despite everything. The modern digital world gives us the possibility of absolute freedom of speech on the one hand, and on the other hand, understanding the modern war which is primarily being waged in the digital world. We'll come back to this, I think. So, a significant value is the ability to truly hear those who often remain silent. At one point, my team and I came to the conclusion that, for example, we genuinely receive support. Support from people, certain comments, likes, all that, participation in rallies. But to truly try, again, this is fundamentally about the essential tools we utilize, to try to deeply feel the genuine support of people who do not explicitly express themselves. That, let's say, might very well be the ultimate goal. Here it's no longer solely about monetary value. Freedom of speech is a value, but the goal is the ability to hear those who remain silent. Let's put it that way.
Let me explain. Maybe, I don't remember if we've already talked about this in our previous episodes, maybe not. And that's why this is actually a good moment to talk about it. Why are we even talking about values in this particular project? Because, well, we know, at least you and I certainly know, that the European Union is fundamentally based on 6 core values. Ukraine, first and foremost, is deeply based on its rich traditions. Well, probably no one would argue with that. But on the other hand, in order for us to continue growing and developing and to become a powerful state, which is what we all strive for, we also need to base ourselves not only on historical heritage and folklore, but on something that is, on the one hand, modern, and on the other hand, something that forms the very foundation of the nation. And in our view, these are in fact values. But the question is, what are these values? They probably coincide with European values in some ways, and in others perhaps they do not. Maybe we even have many more than just 12. Each one is important, but in this project we decided to discuss and select exactly 12 values, among which, without a doubt, one of the most significant is democracy and democratic principles. And what's truly interesting and significant here is that when these fundamental values also become powerful tools, it's really a profound story about deeply understanding precisely who we are right now and who we can genuinely become in the foreseeable future, based on these values. And it's important to understand whether these values are inherent to us. That's why we examine and analyze each value with our guests, sometimes in a very detailed manner under a microscope to understand what it really is, whether it's truly ours, or if we've just made it up for ourselves, and maybe it used to be part of our folklore, but now that's no longer the case. The value that is important for our society, and we try to figure everything out.
Well, indeed, folklore and values are quite a complicated matter, since folklore itself is truly very diverse. Folklore, let's say nominal and mental, are absolutely different things. That is, nominal folklore is like the Verovka choir. Essentially, that's nominal folklore, although that's folklore too. Can we call the revolution on Granite, which we've already mentioned, folklore? Now we can. That's folklore too, that's also about values. But I also wanted to point out that any particular value, first of all, can be thoroughly evaluated from the broader perspective of freedom. What kind of freedom does this value provide? First, and what kind of freedom does this value have? That's the second point. So first, the freedom of a value. And second, a value is not really a constant. A value is not a fixed concept. A value... What inherent and fundamental values does a newborn human child possess?
To live.
To live. A value is indeed the environment. It is truly the growth. Values are carefully and thoughtfully cultivated. Values are deeply and thoroughly instilled. They are profoundly instilled by loving and caring parents, in kindergartens, in schools, in universities, and importantly, by the street as well. Freedom is also a very significant and fundamental core value that is not given at birth. Yes, perhaps you could genuinely say that in some way certain chromosomes are indeed aligned with solar activity, but value is not a constant. Value is something that is carefully and thoughtfully cultivated. And we absolutely cannot say that Ukrainians inherently possess some specific concrete values. It is entirely within our power, here and now, to truly nurture these important values, to actively create new and meaningful values, to develop these values.
But to do this, we really need to define the core values we aspire to.
Let's do it.
That is, in fact, the goal of the entire project. So these 12 fundamental values that we have carefully identified and are currently discussing are actually a crucial call for open communication, for thoughtful discussion, for constructive debate. Do we define these values as our own? Do we want to continue developing them? Or perhaps we need some other new values? Please write to us in the comments if you truly think that more values are really needed. Share your own lists of values. This is actually quite important and truly interesting. And perhaps it's not as straightforward or simple as some light entertainment content that we all genuinely crave right now. But in reality, it's relevant and important to think about for the future. Right now, in fact, it's important to think about values every day as an important tool for shaping the future. Regarding the democracy of society in the past and in the future, in your opinion, can democracy exist without a strong tradition of democratic values in society?
Again, democracy, much like fundamental values, is not something that is fixed or constant. Democracy evolves. Democracy constantly evolves along with our ever-evolving global world. Democracy evolves with technology. Those tools, again, coming back to the idea that democracy is, among other things, a set of important tools for society. Those tools, specifically the modern digital democratic tools, are actively changing democracy. In some ways, they help to simplify democracy. In other ways, of course, they can make democracy more complicated and challenging.
But there are countries where there has never been democracy. There isn't now and probably never will be, right?
Well, let's put it this way. There are indeed some countries where democracy is not envisioned. And there are countries where democracy is a kind of theater. Let's take, for example, the People's Republic of China, where essentially it's a rather unique theater of democracy. The Chinese theater of democracy, indeed. And, among many other significant things, recalling the notable Shenzhen experiment with the system, if my memory serves me correctly, what's it called? The social credit system, of course. On the one hand, that's also a form of democracy. That is, if... Essentially, the fundamental idea embedded within this system is that if you are recognized as a good and contributing individual for the betterment of society, your social rating will increase, your sphere of influence will grow, and you will actively help to develop and advance that society. In essence, this entire framework also functions as a unique kind of participatory democracy. In other words, your personal behavior within society, specifically your consistent ability to act positively and constructively, it benefits society as a whole. Conversely, your negative behavior lowers this rating. Why wouldn't that be considered democracy? It doesn't make sense, does it?
The series Black Mirror depicted this story quite very well.
But there's a significant nuance which we truly like to call our very favorite phrase, the digital concentration camp. this rather tricky, quite narrow and challenging path through an abyss. On one side, we have a digital concentration camp, on the other, democracy. So how do we avoid stepping off the very narrow, winding, thin path?
By the way, if we talk again about other countries and about the future, Winston Churchill said more than half a century ago that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that humanity has invented up to now.
But humanity hasn't come with anything better,
And in fact, the question is why there are still so many authoritarian regimes in the world.
Perhaps it's because of personal freedoms, and again because of national values. Let's say in a country that historically has not had any freedom, and when here we are talking about freedom, we combine three concepts: freedom, value, and democracy. If historically, if from a mother's blood, from being raised by parents, if from school, there was no history of democracy, there were no roots of freedom, then where would they realistically come from? That's precisely why what actually happened in the country of swamps in the early 1990s, there were certainly certain democratic movements, a kind of democratic theater, so to speak, which indeed emerged, but historically there was already absolutely no freedom there whatsoever. Again, we are returning to some certain important historical points, aspects. Unfortunately, I don't have that information in front of me right now, but in some work there was a comparison of the number of uprisings. An uprising is also an expression of democracy. An uprising is an expression of freedom, an expression of dissent. And that too is democracy. And that too is a value. So the number of peasant uprisings, peasant rebellions on the territory of Ukraine in the 1600s, 1700s and 1800s numbered in the thousands, while in the territory of the swamps there were only a few dozen. This is a kind of statistical manifestation of freedom, a clear manifestation of deep democracy, a profound manifestation of historical democracy, something we have truly inherited, and something that is, perhaps somewhere deep within lies the very root of our modern democracy. This includes rebellion, quite oddly enough, and even anarchy. This is not the understanding of modern democracy. Again, we return to the idea that modern democracy is about established rules of democracy. Anarchy, rebellion is a manifestation of freedom, a manifestation of democracy, though not through rules, but it is a manifestation nonetheless. It's the readiness for this, it's the readiness. Well, what exactly is a rebellion? Again, going back to the Ukrainian Cossacks, returning to the fundamental question we've already discussed, that democracy is the understanding of I am I, and the understanding of I am we. A rebellion cannot be done by just one single person. A rebellion is a significant social phenomenon.
One can actually hear the opinion that autocratic regimes are often more effective than democratic ones, for some very obvious reasons, because decisions are made much more quickly. And nowadays such opinions are voiced from time to time quite frequently, even in many democratic societies. What are, let's say, the actual prospects for democracy in the foreseeable future?
The only real chance for democracy in the future is to truly change, to significantly develop, and to evolve. Once again, to move towards an understanding of digital democracy. And this is a very complex issue. We are now already moving beyond the established boundaries of digital democracy, thoughtfully approaching a complex and profound philosophical question. This includes the crucial recognition of artificial intelligence's role in democracy. And this has been raised by many philosophers and science fiction writers, the question of the interaction between human and human intelligence and machine intelligence. And this too can be about democracy. What exactly can artificial intelligence give to us? We started with its deep roots, with ancient mythology, with human history, and now we've truly moved on to the future. The inherent problem of democracy, especially when compared to totalitarian and authoritarian regimes, is really the speed of its decision-making. But how correct these decisions are and what the consequences of these decisions will be, that's the question. Yes, decisions are made quickly, but the world is changing even faster. And with modern technologies, we face the problems in effective decision-making. Again, when we talk about decision-making, we mean making a managerial decision. A totalitarian regime is about personal managerial decision-making. It's very fast, even with a very short period for gathering crucial information. But a decision also truly involves analytics, it also involves additional information. But our modern technologies that we already have may allow us to significantly speed up the decision-making process based on large social data. That is, look, it's very difficult to survey opinions, especially of people who remain silent. And the effectiveness of such a decision is very complicated. But by relying on big data, all of this can be significantly accelerated. And yes, the effectiveness of totalitarian regimes, again I repeat, is in the speed of decision-making. We've already talked with you about the quality of these decisions.
How exactly does democracy combine with or correlate with effective leadership?
Well, it's indeed very much true that people don't like to quote him, but I certainly will. As Vladimir Vysotsky once famously said, we lacked a leader. Of course, there must be strong and effective leadership in place to guide the way forward. Why is this the case? Because there absolutely have to be specific points or sources that are responsible for generating these innovative and crucial ideas, and that in turn leads to further developments. Gather people just around them. Regarding the principles of democracy, regarding effective leadership, regarding strong personal leadership, and in stark contrast to oppressive totalitarian regimes. I remember the posters of the Revolution of Dignity. Do you remember those blue posters with the fish? When a bunch of little fish get eaten by one big fish, and then the little fish band together and eat the big fish. What do you unite around? Of course, in any race there is a leader, the one who runs ahead, the one who actually goes down this path faster, the one who in fact articulates its values more clearly and in a way that is more easily understood and in a manner that is more readily accessible to all. In essence, the leader is truly the bearer of fundamental values, the bearer of clearly articulated and deeply held values, which people either wholeheartedly support and enthusiastically rally around, or they simply do not support and instead rally around another leader. And as I said, the crucial ability to negotiate is very often the essential ability to negotiate between the bearers of important values, between influential leaders.
In your considered opinion, what currently poses, if such a significant threat truly exists, the greatest danger to Ukrainian democracy today?
Well, what we refer to with the three letters PTN. And the question is the development of democracy. On one significant side of the scales, we have the powerful concept of democracy, and on the other opposing side, we have the forces of resistance. Unfortunately, war and democracy in reality are not synonymous and not compatible. But democracy, this large number of small fish against one big one, is a tool. Even in times of war.
If, for example, in Ukraine, let's imagine a situation where tomorrow democracy disappears and a strong, rigid vertical of power appears.
That has already happened before.
The question was how society would react to this. Accordingly, we already know from history how society will react to this.
Yes, in a spiral. Everything develops in a spiral. Maybe that's how it will be, maybe not. Let's put it this way. At one time we studied such a thing as the timeline of theorizing civil society. Right now, we're in a period when civil society organizations have started to quarrel among themselves. These leaders have started, well, that's part of it, that's how it goes. And understanding that everyone's activity is a kind of sin wave, meaning that's normal. We work during the day and sleep at night. Some people work at night and sleep during the day. These are certain personal sine waves. Some civil society organization or civic idea or social idea or value is active now. Tomorrow it will be less active, but another one will be active instead. What I want to say is that they exist in a kind of asynchrony, but such views, let's say philosophical views on all our Maidans, all our resistance against this leader, this totalitarian one, it simply serves to show that at a particular and crucial moment, all these diverse and individual personal activities of each and every individual, all these distinct and asynchronous values come together, become synchronized and rise up against these oppressive restrictions of totalitarianism, which truly and indeed tries to step on our very throats, on the throat of every single precious and fundamental individual freedom. And here we are already talking about the freedom of the I together with the freedom of the we. This is the freedom of the nation.
Do you recall a significant moment in your professional or public life when you genuinely had to stand up for fundamental democratic values?
Of course.
Which one?
Well, let's put it this way. If we're talking about concrete examples, then just literally the day before yesterday, we had our very own value at stake. Well, let's say these are already quite local, absolutely specific, and truly particular stories indeed. We have a local park that we've been fighting for over many years, for essential repairs, for its restoration, for making sure people don't light bonfires there. For example, our value, which the residents joined in on, and there are many things of value in the park. Mr. Novikov from NV Radio, I apologize for mentioning specific names, once released beautiful koi fish into the serene lake there, these distinctive Japanese fish. That's a truly significant value. We genuinely gained our own unique value. We carefully developed this cherished value. Local residents would frequently come and lovingly feed these peaceful fish. Perhaps it's a form of calming meditation, but it is indeed a profound value. People fed the fish swam around, and for us that was a value. For citizens, it's valuable that people don't make campfires on the grass, that the park is only for walking. That's a value. And again, democracy is truly about finding meaningful compromises for me. We found a compromise. With business, a significant compromise was reached with the municipal enterprise, and a further compromise was also made with the local community. A relatively small area within the park was specifically allocated where a business successfully set up several gazebos. People who want to relax, as is our custom, to grill outdoors. Maybe it's a certain national tradition. It's not just here. Picnics in Kyiv, just like in the United States, are a kind of significant ritual, indeed a national value. We have that too. But we found a compromise, we reached an agreement, we have a kind of social contract. This area pleases for that. You gather together, it's convenient for you, you set up there. Yes, business makes money from this. It's a public-private partnership. But the business also provided security for the park, maintained the order in the park. We got an area where those for whom this is important, this situation to grill, to barbecue, can do so. But for the community, the value is the park, and the park is green. So both the wolves are fed and the sheep are safe. And that was a certain compromise. Yesterday, the numerous gazebos were unfortunately demolished. Yes, I fully understand that there were indeed legal violations there, that they were operating without the necessary documents, but right now we're talking about values. On the one hand, value for the development of the state means value is the law. Yes, indeed, the law was quite truly violated there. However, at the very same time, a certain small social contract was also really and actually broken. We have a big social contract which consists of small compromises. Was significantly violated, and for now I still do not perceive any particular development in this regard, but the broader community has clearly perceived it quite negatively, and this pervasive negativity itself also holds a certain intrinsic value.
So, right now you've described a situation where you acted as a public organization, and you interacted, including with local self-government, probably quite a bit.
Yes. In finding this important compromise, well, on the one hand, of course, the public organization here acts merely as a simple administrative tool for submitting and efficiently processing various requests. It's essentially a technical tool, nothing more than that. Again, it's a tool, a kind of unifying instrument, an idea. People united around the idea was developed, and so was the compromise. Well, a compromise is an agreement. Once there is an agreement, everything is calm. Well, now a new agitator has appeared. I still don't know how all this will end, how it will continue, we'll see. Everything is in progress.
And how do you, in fact, assess more broadly, if we look not only at the specific story with the park, the role of local self-government in Ukraine now, including in the context of democracy?
The role of local self-government? I do not want to present my own personal view within the specific framework of this particular lecture, since there is currently a very active and ongoing struggle between the central authorities and local self-government. I fully understand that war does not necessarily imply democracy, it simply does not imply democracy at all, but again, it's truly about compromise. Therefore, it is crucial to consider all perspectives. Let me tell you how it should be. There should be a proper balance between the central governmental authorities and the local self-government bodies, and this particular balance should be a legal balance in making crucial decisions that effectively counterbalance each other. And at the very center of this essential balance should be the community, should be society itself, which is also a vital part of it. As a certain stabilizer of the societal balance, this is also a value.
Let me remind you that today in the studio of the Archetype of the Nation project we are talking about democracy with Anton Osmak. Is it possible to raise a democratic citizen without democracy in school and in higher education institutions?
No.
And now for another question, how do you support democratic principles in your work when you are teaching students?
Let's put it this way, there is such an approach that things should be done only this way and no other. Because I said so. Yes, because I said so. Let's say, for instance, there is indeed the issue, yes, that we have raised concerning democracy and the rule of law. There are various issues that are clearly defined by established law, by specific procedure, by significant events, and so on. But for example, when I work with students, I would say that you really don't have to agree with me, so let's discuss it further. Maybe I'll change my point of view. Maybe you have your own unique perspective on this matter. I am not talking about some specific kind of knowledge, but rather the understanding that everyone has their own experiences, including each and every student, including democratic experience. I always try to conduct things in a dialogue format. You know, I often have classes. We call it an after party. When an interesting topic comes up, and by the way, it usually comes up around questions of democracy. After class, we can keep working for another hour, 2, or even 3. There have been times when we finished class at midnight. Seriously. Because the topic, the one we discussed in class, resonated with the students so much that they simply demanded to keep developing it. And at the same time, I fully understand that, let's say, our modern society, and indeed really any human society, consists of certain distinct age groups. Often, age groups don't understand each other. Again, achieving true balance is the same as truly understanding those who remain completely silent. Understanding other points of view. Because, for example, in the vibrant city of Kyiv, we currently have a particularly acute and pressing problem. The very same projects within civil society and indeed in a democratic society are often targeted at rather narrow social groups. But no one analyzes the ideas of those who are silent, and usually the majority remains silent. And no one truly analyzes the genuine needs of the vast majority. Yes, a rather narrow social group is quite active, they make themselves heard very loudly, they possess a clear leader, they are strongly united, and they consistently push for specific solutions. But any solution that gets pushed through solution, that's a great phrase, affects not only this social group, it affects society as a whole. It's the same with students. Personally, for me, this communication with students is incredibly valuable, especially when they don't stay completely silent. The crucial point is not to remain silent, because I genuinely get certain insightful feedback from them about how they truly see these standard everyday life situations from the unique perspective of another social group. Because, you see, what I personally know, for example, is fundamentally based on my own individual experience. To carefully adjust these important ideas, these established practices to another distinct social group and working closely with students, quite aside from teaching, is also a significant kind of sociology. To adapt this practice to another social group, that by the way is the real value, having the very important opportunity for direct dialogue with such a diverse group.
By the way, you just mentioned that the vast majority of society or a particular social group usually remains quite silent. Can we truly say that the more people who actively choose not to stay silent, the more genuinely democratic a society ultimately becomes?
Yes, but statistically speaking, it's typically 10 to 14%. Moreover, we currently have certain relevant statistics, and experienced analysts tend to believe that in our particular case, the number of people who don't remain silent is probably the highest in the world, 14%. That was during the Revolution of Dignity. I think that's when the number was the highest. People who didn't stay silent, and that's a value too.
So from this point of view, Ukrainians are even more democratic than, say, Europe. That's a plus.
That's a big, bold plus. Blue and yellow. Even, let's put it this way, yes, plus, as the military say.
Do you ever have internal doubts about whether democracy is the right path?
Of course.
Why?
Because having no real doubts is totalitarianism. Doubt is, analysis. So if I have doubts, it means every step is a doubt, and whether this step is the right one.
And that's democracy?
That too, of course. doubts. That might actually be the very problem with democracy. What we discussed with you, that is, European democracy. Well, European democracy is indeed much built on a doubt. They are always doubting, and what we talked about, that it's slow. But in these doubts, they fight for the quality of the decision made. The advantage of totalitarianism is that decisions are made quickly, almost without doubt, but the quality is not there. Here it's a different value, the quality of democracy.
Are there any democratic practices or systems that we currently don't have yet and that we absolutely should adopt?
Are there any democratic practices? Yes, we have all of them. The fundamental question is whether society is truly ready to fully develop these essential democratic practices. I think that in some respects we actually have more democratic practices than some other countries. However, democratic practices, it's a matter of readiness. Any practice can exist. When a certain critical threshold is reached, when it becomes truly impossible to go on without that consistent practice, that's precisely when it truly starts to work. At the very basic fundamental level of the community, specifically the local community, let's consider the smallest units as a prime example. Democracy within the family, the smallest unit. Democracy on the floor of an apartment building. That's also a very important practice. Why is it that in one building one floor is neat and orderly while another is a mess? But the building is the same, the people are not that different. That's also a practice. It's the ability to talk, the ability to negotiate, the ability to listen, the willingness to act. Democracy in the building. Does the building have a tool for making collective decisions or not? Democracy in the neighborhood. It starts from small growth to something bigger, from small democracies to big democracies. And there can be countless and numerous tools, especially in today's rapidly evolving digital world. But the fundamental essence of democracy is to effectively use these available tools and to be able to seek meaningful compromises.
Let's talk a little about folklore. One significant part of our episode is always dedicated to the rich tapestry of folklore. If we talk about the profound reflection of democracy in folklore, then even in the most ancient and archaic genres and works, for example, in traditional carols, where birds held a council to decide how to create the universe. This also reflects a certain degree of democracy. To more modern works, to fairy tales where, for example, Kirilo Kozhumyaka did not listen to the prince who came to ask him to save his daughter from the dragon, but instead listened to the children, that is, to the community. Of course, in the times of the Cossack Duma, where there was always a council to which the Hetman would turn and say to choose the next Hetman. So, in the folk tradition, this democracy is reflected in different ways. In your personal opinion, can we still try to formulate or define what is Ukrainian democracy truly this profound value that is deeply traditional and genuinely comes from ancient historical times? Or is it still something modern?
Of course, with the ancient Trypillian culture. The Trypillian culture is, in its very essence, our true history. It's not someone else's. It is truly our own history. The Trypillian history is a kind of rule of democracy when people united, came to an agreement, created a certain, let's say, found a certain compromise here. Trypillia. This is also a manifestation of democracy. They all agreed that we would indeed cultivate the land together in this very specific, particular way. Of course, actually, history it truly reinforces the present moment. The Cossack era reinforces the present. The Ukrainian insurgent army reinforces the present. The present reinforces the present.
That's why we say that folklore is the foundation.
It's the roots. It's not yet the trunk, but it's already the roots. It's truly what democracy grows from, and that is what it is.
On this truly wonderful note, let's now move on to the exciting Folklore box, which is our traditional game with our esteemed guest. Today, in our Folklore box, we have proverbs. Which ones? Some of them. Some are related to democracy and some are not. Your primary task is to carefully read the proverb and then clearly state whether it is directly related to the fundamental value of democracy, to democracy itself, or if not, what else it is truly related to. Life is good where people sow and reap together.
Democracy, of course, together as a group. There is even a civic organization called Hetman, and they have a great website called Hetman. It seems they have a bunch of civic projects under the Hetman branding. Of course, democracy. Of course, this is about democracy.
The community is a council that decided so, and so it will be.
Oh, there's a lot of democracy here. Both the community is democracy and the council is democracy. The main thing is, it decided. This means that the community has come to an agreement. The community has found its own compromise. And again, such a manifestation of European democracy is compromise and accepting another point of view. That is where the freedom of the community stands above the freedom of a particular individual. Yes, that's democracy.
Moving on. The godfather and godmother know half the people in the village.
Well, the godfather and the godmother most likely can take a very active and significant part in the upcoming election process, since they already have half of the entire village as their loyal voters, and, well, in principle, we certainly wish them a resounding victory.
I would say that this proverb probably signifies strong horizontal connections.
Yes.
Next, this one's quite a little bit more involved. Tricky, let's say, probably. Together it's easier to beat even the father.
Well, if you replace father with the father, the leader, that's what our Belarusian neighbors failed to do in the 2000s and 2020s. Of course.
Let it be as the people say.
Of course, democracy is exactly that kind of essential compromise. That is, when people are truly able to come to a mutual agreement, to reach a crucial social contract, a fundamental social compromise. One of the primary manifestations of democracy is making a meaningful collective decision. The same Cossachdom is also democracy. Cossachdom is about electiveness. And how can it endure this? By the decision of the people.
Woe to the sheep where the wolf is the shepherd.
Well, if the sheep truly don't unite, and the wolf is not just a mere shepherd, but also a powerful and oppressive dictator, well, there is. Yes, it needs to be framed a bit differently. This is indeed the proverb. The entire background absolutely needs to be made red. Oh, the text should be yellow, and it should serve as a challenge to others.
Without a council, the army perishes.
Compromising, because again, the Cossachdom... Let me, if I may, just shift the entire perspective a little bit. There's an American proverb, or rather not exactly a traditional proverb. Let's say it's more of a modern economic saying, a contemporary economic adage, if you will. It goes something like this. 10 Japanese individuals can accomplish more than 10 Americans. But 10 Americans can achieve more than 10 Japanese individuals. It's complicated. But in Kaizen, that is, in the American context, in the prevailing ideology of production, personal initiative plays a very significant and indeed crucial role. For the Japanese people, their inherent strength truly lies in collective initiative and collaborative effort. That is, as a team, 10 Japanese working together will accomplish more than 10 Americans working individually, but individually 10 Americans can achieve much more than 10 Japanese, since each of them is their own personal leader. Again, it comes down to the question of compromises. Each point needs to be carefully considered individually and separately. Both strong personal initiative from each dedicated individual and a comprehensive shared vision of the broader, bigger picture are extremely and fundamentally important. I'm not military, but speaking of military terms, I've spoke a lot with people from 2014. We did volunteer work helping. In the trench, you couldn't see the battlefield. But a private in the trenches on the front lines can show such initiative that it saves many other soldiers. Again, it's a matter of personal initiative and understanding compromise for the greater, for the public good.
Thank you. That was very meaningful. A meaningful comment, a meaningful response to the proverb. It's very interesting that it provoked such a thorough response. To conclude, here's the Blitz interview. 7 short questions, 7 short or not so short answers.
Like in the Nagant revolver, right? It actually has 7 bullets.
What one trait do you value most in people?
It's hard to say. May I refuse to answer this particular question because I would like to. You know, every single person is a unique individual. And in every single person, you can truly value the distinctive trait that genuinely makes up their profound individuality. You could certainly say you can value not just a specific character trait, but indeed the person as a complete and remarkable whole.
Which trait do you consider the worst?
The same way. It's the same question. The worst trait is the one that destroys a person's individuality.
What inspires you?
I'm deeply inspired by the profound understanding that the time will come when we are gone, but our children will live here.
What scares you?
I'm scared by... Well, I can answer rather jokingly. Morning on the hill Szczekawitsia. Yes, of course, that is in fact partly an answer to the previous question. I truly want children to live in a truly great and prosperous country.
What helped you hold on during the difficult moments in life?
At the very beginning of the war, we created a Telegram channel. We have psychologists there, and the idea is to successfully overcome stress through meaningful communication, through interaction. It's still active. There are quite a lot of people there. When there are now incoming attacks during the strikes, it's quite active. People communicate, and in this way people overcome their fear. It truly helped people overcome this significant fear.
What is the main goal or mission of your life?
Probably my own children. To answer the previous question once again, so that they really, truly inherit a great country.
If you had to choose 3 words that characterize Ukrainians, what would those words be?
Oh, I don't want to say any bad words. Fierceness sometimes. Love of freedom. These are the good traits, and conversely, a bad trait is... Let me put it to you this way. I'll articulate the word freedom as both a truly good trait and simultaneously a bad trait. Strange as it may sound, but this very anarchic freedom, This very same recklessness, it truly works wonders with the resilient Ukrainians, especially when these brave Ukrainians become celebrated heroes, and at the same time, when this powerful force isn't somehow carefully limited by certain crucial levers, fundamental values, or other important guiding principles, they can also unfortunately become a complete laughingstock.
And now it's time for the Artifact segment, where we ask our guests to leave something as a memento of themselves, something related to the topic of the episode. Please tell us and show us what you have brought with you.
Well, first of all, since I've been actively working with visual graphics for quite a very long period of time, including deeply understanding graphics as a powerful form of propaganda. And today, well, as in a broader historical context, during difficult times, poster art experienced a significant surge in development. And now, the current situation is truly insane. Right now, there are an incredible number of amazing and talented artists actively working within the social media sphere, producing so many genuinely great and impactful works. For instance, those created by the innovative Titov or the exceptionally skilled Grekov. I won't list them all, there are just so many of them. At the same time, I'll say something interesting. They are, in a way, united and work within their own social group. But Kustovsky, by the way, Kusto and I previously published a comprehensive book authored by Sherbak, which was also specifically about poster art and was beautifully illustrated by him. It's just gorgeous. So here I have today's children's poster about democracy.
Oh, awesome.
Let me show it like this.
This relates to recent events.
There's a clever play on words here. A young girl is holding a piece of cardboard that clearly says democracy. Democracy and craft. Craft refers to these compelling paper and cardboard posters that vividly depict the profound freedom of every individual citizen, all of whom have united into a single, powerful and endless stream, and have clearly demonstrated that democracy is truly alive and thriving in Ukraine.
Can we say that here in Ukraine we're creating our own kind of craft democracy? Yes?
Yes, craft democracy, like craft beer. And the Comprehensive Handbook of Civic Activism in Kyiv, a valuable tool for civic participation for active and engaged Kyiv residents. See, it's a handbook. I'm giving it away with a heavy heart, but actually I have another one. I just keep it at work. I didn't manage to bring it, but you can tell this one's been used. The pages here are bent. By the way, it was officially published by the Department of Public Communications, and within this publication a comprehensive collection of these essential tools has been gathered. These are the very tools that we have thoroughly discussed with you, specifically highlighting the extensive opportunities available for every individual to fully realize and express their democratic aspirations by effectively utilizing modern digital tools and technologies.
Thank you very much. It's a truly very interesting book, which I will most definitely read completely.
You don't need to read it.
I'll look through it.
You don't need to look at it.
I'll analyze it.
You don't just need to analyze it, you simply need to use it.
All right. Thank you very much for coming to us today. Thank you very much for an interesting and meaningful conversation. I'm absolutely sure it will be very useful and highly beneficial for all our esteemed viewers and dedicated listeners. And I sincerely wish you continued success in all your scientific, educational, and creative endeavors. Thank you very much. Friends, today in our studio we had Anton Osmak, PhD in Public Administration, Associate Professor of the Department of National Economy and Public Administration at Vadym Hetman Kyiv National Economic University, and Head of the public organization My Vidradnyi. Write in the comments what interesting things you learned for yourself. Do you believe that democracy is one of the important values inherent to the Ukrainian people? Let me remind you that you can watch episodes of the Archetype of the Nation project on YouTube. Listen on your favorite podcast platforms and read on the website magicworld.com.ua. In particular, there you will find popular science essays prepared by folklorist Marina Demediuk, as well as recordings of folklore works performed by famous actors. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.